Tons of spring football games going on this weekend, and especially starting on this Friday night down in the Commonwealth as we bring on Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football to help us break down the Kentucky spring game that's just in the books. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Mark. It's the weather's actually decent up here for once, and or down here for once. So it's been a good night for football.
You know, it's taken spring a while to visit us, and hopefully it stays for a while and doesn't depart after a couple days, which it may based on what I see out of the forecast. But for us up in here in Connecticut, that's been our plight as well here early in the spring in April. But Kentucky hits the football field tonight to culminate spring workouts. I'd like to remind everyone to subscribe to my YouTube channel for the very best in college football coverage with contributors like Kevin. Check out his work along with Mike LaValle and Tony Siracusa at Last Word on College Football. We're talking Kentucky, but we've got the group chat on, the live chat, and certainly bring forth your college football questions and comments as well as we talk the Wildcats. So, Kevin, of course, the quarterback position is way up in the air, and a number of candidates, as we have discussed previously, who have basically no experience at this level. And what did we see tonight?
I think that Coach Stoops and the offense, Eddie Grand, Darren Henshaw, they saw some good things from all four of the guys who are competing for the job. All took snaps and all looked pretty good. Gunnar Hoke threw for 125 yards and 1 touchdown. Terry Wilson, who's a junior college guy, came in from out in Kansas. He's the former Oregon commit. He threw for 131 yards and made a couple of really nice runs. We've talked in the past. That's the one thing that Kentucky's kind of lacked, that kind of dual threat quarterback. He made a couple of nice runs. He did have 1 interception. It really wasn't his fault. It was a tip ball, that was picked off by Mike Edwards. I mean, both those guys did some good things. In fact, Coach Stoops, after the game, even before the game today on the radio, he told reporters that more than likely he's not going to name a starting quarterback until the summer. And so once they get back into fall camp, and he even alluded to the fact tonight after the game that they may end up, for the first game or two, may end up playing both Wilson and Hoke. So, I don't know if that's not necessarily a platoon system, but that is something that's being talked about. And then the other two, Danny Clark, who's the former Ohio State commit, he had I think it was 46 yards, in limited action. And then the fourth man in the rotation, Walker Wood, who's a local kid from here in Lexington, Lafayette. He threw a touchdown late in the game. Actually, the receiver was out of bounds, but they said it's a spring game, whatever. Let's just call it a touchdown. So, but that's like I said, all 4 of them did some good things. And there's obviously there's going to be things that they're going to need, things that they're going to be able to need to work on, because as you said, none of them have played a down in an actual ball game.
Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football to break down Kentucky's spring game, which just finished up just minutes ago with the Wildcats, the blue and the white, the offense taking on the defense, that sort of point system that we won't even try to challenge you, Kevin, on trying to decipher and communicate to us, because we won't be able to understand it. It doesn't count except for some kind of pride or a steak dinner or whatever the coaches have decided. The question I have for you, based on the quarterback play, and it might be difficult based on this limited sample size, but do you get a feel for each quarterback's strengths, weaknesses, style of play? Did they seem to call plays that might be a little bit in deference to those skills?
Yeah, they did. Hoke has been, he kind of maybe has the advantage a little bit because he's been in the system for 2 years, and he knows, what offensive coordinator Eddie Grand, is looking for. They kind of had a set for him. With Wilson, like I said, it was more the run pass option. He threw both of them threw deep balls, but Wilson, tried to go deep a lot. He has that big, strong arm, and, they tried to throw a lot of deep balls. And that's something, that the coaching staff hopes to get back to this year. In 2016, when they had Jeff Badette, who, transferred to Oklahoma after that season, he was one of the best, deep threats in the nation. And last year without him, they struggled with that deep ball was, Steven Johnson, at quarterback. And that's something, no matter which one of those quarterbacks ends up doing it, and it could be both because they both have very strong arms. That's something that's going to be a big thing this year. They're going to look for that downfield, that long strike. Like I said, Hoke is more of your standard passer, drop back passer. And I said, Wilson is the run pass option, Cam Newton, I'm not comparing him to Cam Newton, but that's, player wise, but that would be who I would, what they're looking at, something like that with those guys. And so, like I said, it's, they kind of had a set of plays, for each guy, but then they both did saying things, similarly.
Well, Kevin, you know what typically the situation is with the fan base. They typically like the guy with the biggest upside, with the biggest ceiling to win the job and think, okay, that guy's got the biggest arm. We want to see him, or he had the highest recruiting ranking. Therefore, we want him to win the job, or he's the most dynamic athlete. Is there a particular, based on, the group of Kentucky fans that you have around you, the fan base that you know of, and the work that you do with Last Word on College Football, does there seem to be a favorite among the fans?
Yeah, I think it's Terry Wilson. I mean, nothing against Gunnar Hoke. I mean, he's a great player, and I think he would be, if he ends up winning the job, I think he would do well. But there's just something about there. I don't want to say an aura, but it's like, we've heard about this guy. He was, so good coming out of high school, and then he did good things, at his community college in Kansas. There's just something, he's the kind of player that Kentucky's not really had. Especially, quarterback wise, he's, as I said, he can sling the ball. He can run the ball. There's a lot of people in the fan base, I think, that have become, pretty enamored, with Wilson, just from watching, just in practice, listen to him talk, the way he talks about things, how he wants to come in, and, they all say, of course, they want, this to be the year that, Kentucky wins the SEC. Now I'm not going to get crazy and call it like that. But yeah, I would say a lot of the fan base is probably leaning more towards Wilson. But, like I said, they have to prove it. They have from now until September 1st when they line up against, Central Michigan to prove it. But that's what I would say. I'd say a lot of the fan base is probably leaning towards Wilson.
Talking college football with Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. I asked that you join Kevin. You got Mike LaValle, you've got Tony Siragusa, and if you watch my videos here, you know that they contributed and helped me out a ton here, covering Tennessee, UCLA, and Kentucky in particular, and really all of college football. And with Kevin and Mike in particular, the SEC, Kentucky spring game just wrapped up, and of course the quarterback situation is in limbo. Not in limbo from a negative standpoint, but just 4 guys battling for a job that not any one of them have shown anything in a meaningful game at this level that they can prove anything. But of course, we don't see what happens day to day during the practices. And a lot, Kevin, as you well know, is focused on concerning the spring game, because now they're televised and there are people in the stands. But there are 4 or 5 scrimmages throughout these spring sessions where they put it on the line just in the same manner as the spring game. So the coaches evaluate it as a full-on scrimmage and draw from those scrimmages just as well. They just don't have the cameras there for the people to see. So it's difficult sometimes to gather much from the spring game, or we amplify it too much because it's the one time we get to see the guys on the field during the spring and say, hey, man, that guy threw 2 interceptions. He's awful. Let's get rid of him. He's not going to win the job. So we
right. Yeah. Well, they had, along those lines, they had 2 other scrimmages, like live scrimmages. The first one got kind of pared down because of the weather, and from all the reports, the defense, put a good whipping on the offense. But then the one they had last week, the roles were reversed. Apparently, the offense looked great, and the defense was kind of, eh. So, but like as you were saying earlier, they had the kind of wacky, scoring system where the defense could get points. The final score, for those that care, was the white, the blue, who was the offense, they had 45 points, and the white, who was the defense, had 32. So, at least the offense did win. Another guy I want to mention who actually may have ended up being the star of the game tonight was A.J. Rose, who's a redshirt sophomore running back. Benny Snell played limited. I think he ran maybe 6 times for 35 yards. Didn't play a lot. They weren't planning on playing him a lot. You don't want your, potential all SEC running back getting hurt, in the spring game. But he ran for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns and caught, I think, 3 passes for another 12 yards. And he was, if you were going to give an MVP of the game, he would be it. So with Snell not playing a whole lot, and then the other player, Siam King, who's competing with Rose for that backup, the backup running back job, he was out because of he was in concussion protocol. So, but AJ Rose, like I said, I definitely want to mention he was probably, if you're looking for an MVP, if you can have an MVP of a spring game, he would be the guy. So he looked very, very impressive tonight.
Talking up the Cats here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with a Friday night Kentucky spring game in the books. So we've got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football. And of course, we're focusing on Kentucky football. But if you leave your comments and your questions, we'll jump on the line and answer those as well and respond. But we're focused on Kentucky. And Kevin, I hate to tell you this, but I think you've got an idea with all the college football that I scan on a Saturday and lock into from as much as I can possibly gather. Don't catch the Cats a lot. I remember catching about half the Georgia game last year, and there's just typically a more national game on that I need to lock in on. I did catch the bowl game. I try to watch all the major bowl games in terms of, when I say major, the Power 5 bowl games. And that was a great game, obviously, with Northwestern. So I did see that game start to finish. So who should a guy like myself, a guy that's a fringe fan, follows the SEC or the national landscape, know about concerning Kentucky football for 2018?
Well, I think it starts with Benny Snell. We know you talked about the Music City Bowl, the unfortunate set of events that happened with the ejection, and we won't get into that.
And Kevin, not to cut you off, but I will just quickly, because it's unfortunate that a player of Benny Snell's caliber, who I believe was second in the SEC in rushing, if I recall correctly,
he was.
And of course, I knew about Benny Snell and watched him play a number of times, but he probably gained more attention nationally because of that incident than his football playing ability. Yeah,
no, he did, and it brought, you're right, it brought a lot of attention to that game, and it brought a lot of attention to the to the official. And they even used the whole get up, so I don't need your help to get up. They even used the hashtag get up. That's what they're calling for 2018. It's UK football get up. So if you see all the commercials, they had a Super Bowl commercial that ran. It was really, really cool. I mean, it starts with him. Like I said, if there may be a better running back in the SEC, but I said I'm partial to him. He needs about 1,400 yards to break the all-time record for Kentucky rushing from Sonny Collins. I think Snell has about 2,400 some yards, and Sonny Collins has a record about 38. And I don't see any reason why he couldn't get that this year and become the school's all-time leading rusher. And honestly, I would say this is probably, I would be shocked if he's back. I think he will declare, for the draft, barring something unforeseen, heaven forbid, talk about injuries or anything like that. But I think it starts with Snell, and then it goes, the quarterback situation is going to be, in kind of a state of flux until September. But then I think you flip to the other side of the ball, and, Kentucky has probably some of the best set of linebackers, I think, in the conference. You got Josh Allen, you got Denzel Ware, you have Jordan Jones. Of course, Jordan Jones injured his shoulder in practice, had to have surgery. He will be back. They say he'll be back around August. You have those 3 guys. They lost Courtney Love, but another guy who's going to be somebody to watch, who was probably the defensive star tonight, is a guy by the name of Cash Daniel. He's a Kentucky kid from Painesville. He had 8 tackles and a forced fumble. He's going to be really good. And of course, you get in the secondary, you have Mike Edwards, who's is one of the best safeties, one of the best safeties in the conference. We talked about him a lot last year. Those are some of the main guys. And another guy I think it's going to have a breakout season is Lynn Bowden, wide receiver from out of Ohio. He did some good things as a freshman last year. and they're saying he's doing everything that he needs, to take the next step, this year. And that's another guy. We talked about, the threat with the deep ball. Maybe he could be that guy. They have some other players. Also, wide receiver. Like I said, they're trying to find that guy who had that deep ball. But I would say Snell. I would say, like I said, whoever ends up being the quarterback, and then especially those guys on defense, because Josh Allen and Jones and Ware and Mike Edwards all thought about applying for the draft this year, and they all decided to come back for one more season and see what and see what they could do. And so it's kind of the opposite of changing sports for a second. It's kind of the opposite of basketball, where Kentucky's unfortunately or fortunately become known for the one and done. So those guys come back. That I think that if you focus on those guys right there, that would be a really good start.
Yeah, so we've got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football, and we encourage you to join him and the rest of the crew right there that do such a tremendous job covering the sport that we love. We're talking Kentucky football because the Wildcats just finished up their spring game on a Friday night. And in looking at the stats here, and you all mentioned guys, Kevin, that I'm familiar with on defense and have seen play, maybe this is a storyline that's sneaking past most of us, that Kentucky has a tremendous amount of talent and production coming back on defense here. Mike Edwards, 96 tackles. We know how good he is. 4 tackles for loss, led the team in tackles, 4 INTs as well. He's one of the very best in the country. Courtney Love, you mentioned his situation, but he had 92 total stops last year. Josh Allen had 10.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. Jordan Jones, he's one of the best in the conference as well and has been. 7.5 tackles for loss for him and 64 tackles. And on down the line, Denzel Ware, also returning production right there with 9.5 tackles for loss. He had 6.5 sacks. That's a lot of big play production in the opponent's backfield that's coming back to Kentucky this year. So, yeah, you find that quarterback and you've got a star running back who, we could argue, is he the best in the SEC or the second best or the third best? Well, he's there. He is right up there with the Najee Harris, Damian Harris line of running backs. DeAndre Swift probably going to break out and have a huge year for Georgia this year. But Kentucky, man, if they could figure out that quarterback situation, I don't know what the offensive line situation looks like as well. But this is an exciting bunch.
Yeah, the offensive line is solid. They have almost everyone. I think everyone back actually from last year who played significant minutes. I think it's 18 overall. I think it's 18 starters, back from last season. They have 10 on offense, 10 on defense, and 8 on offense. Yeah, like I said, we've talked about it before. The one question mark with this team is the defensive line, and you have guys like Quentin Bohanna who have really, Phil Hoskins who've have really stepped up and had great springs. I think those are guys that they're going to look to get big things for. Another guy to watch out for is Josh Paschal. He's a sophomore who played linebacker as a true freshman last year, but he's put on about 20, 30 pounds, and they're talking of moving him to the defensive end position, kind of that hybrid, kind of like what Denzel Ware plays, going back a few years, like Bud Dupree, that same kind of, who's with the Steelers now, that same kind of position. Those are some guys that they're really, looking for to make some big waves on the defensive line. Like I said, they get the quarterback situation straightened out. Like I said, they have Snell, they have some talented receivers, but they're all, fairly young. They have Dorian. One guy who's going to be back is Dorian Baker, who was a big play guy 2 seasons ago, missed last season due to injury. They held him out of spring, pretty much out of the spring drills. And also got to talk about CJ Conrad, at tight end, who I think is, top 3 probably tight ends in the conference. He also is coming off of injuries and coming off of surgery and was held out this spring as well. So, they, at some points, like the Cats were having to use, offensive tackles like Landon Young, and a couple walk-on guys, just to have people out there at tight end, just to kind of, go through the motions and show, with the offense. Like I said, the defense should be good. We thought they were going to be good last year, especially the secondary, and it was kind of a disappointment. Something else I think that's going to help is Dean Hood, who was, coached linebackers last year, is going to move back and help with the secondary, along with Steve Klinkscale. I think, those two, I think having Hood back there will really help Edwards and those guys. And so, like I said, it's the potential is there for a really big season, but scheduling and everything else, you just never know how it's going to work out. But the potential is there. I think I think you say this every year. Kentucky fans are cautiously optimistic. Maybe this is going to be the year that they're going to break through, get the 9-win season, and then we'll just see what happens. But like I said, going back to what you said, you talk about Snell, you talk about the guys at linebacker, you talk about Mike Edwards. That those are the guys that I would pay if you're going to start. Who to watch on the Kentucky team. Those would be the players.
Yeah, Central Michigan is the opening game there on September 1st at the Commonwealth. No, that's at home, obviously. Kroger Field.
Yes,
that's what it's
still Commonwealth Stadium to me, but that's
absolutely.
But it's it's Kroger Field. They paid like $10 million a year or something for naming rights. So you got to go with what with the money. So.
Well, I noticed that even Alabama's spring game next Saturday in Tuscaloosa is sponsored by Golden Flake.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's anymore.
I think it's a cereal. I believe it's cereal.
I don't know.
Or no, it could be potato chips. I can't remember. Honestly, I should know this, but I think it's potato chips actually. So yeah,
Central Michigan for the opener at home, and then that vaunted trip to Florida. Will this be the year? Will this be the year?
I'm just going to go ahead and say no. Sorry, Kentucky fans that are watching. And basically, if what's going to happen, I think, is they're going to sneak up some year, kind of like when they broke the streak against Tennessee, 7 years ago. It's going to be a game where you don't expect them to win, and they're going to pop up and beat Florida. Last year that was probably the most frustrating, maddening game. And Kentucky, Kentucky's had a lot of them. I've, thought about doing a post for Last Word on, college football, doing something about, Kentucky's best wins. But then it's like, do you want about Kentucky's worst losses? And it's like, okay, where do you start? Because there's been so many over the years. They had Florida. They should have won that game. They should have broke the streak. Playing in the Swamp, I'm going to say I don't think they win this year. Maybe 2019 will be the year. Who knows?
So what's obviously been the key for Kentucky and that second tier in the SEC Eastern Division is it's shuffled around a little bit, but right now it's a Georgia division, and then everybody else. And Tennessee looks to be. I don't think they're awful. I think the talent's pretty good, so they're going to win some games, and they'll get back up into that mix for contention for a bowl game, I would expect. But how do you do against Missouri, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, South Carolina? Do you win those games? And in addition to that, though, the two games in the SEC Western Division, and looking at your schedule, so you win two of the first three games for sure, and maybe you steal one at Florida, and that's not going to be monumental. From a historic standpoint, it would be monumental, but from a talent standpoint, that's going to be a toss-up. And you're going to be on the road, so obviously Florida's going to be a slight favorite, you would think, at this point. Who knows how the teams are going to stand at that point. But you got Murray State at home in week 3. And then this is a difficult stretch in which the season could teeter right here, because there are 3 winnable games, but there are also 3 very losable games. You're not playing Alabama or somebody who okay, most likely we're going to lose that game, and you're not stomping on Vanderbilt. You're playing 3 comparable teams here that you could win or lose: Mississippi State, South Carolina, Texas A&M in a row. That could be anything. That could be 2-1, 1-2, 3-0, 0-3. It could be anything there, and that might shake out the season right there and set you up for a great home stretch, in which then you take on Mizzou and Vandy and those teams that you should beat, or you're in trouble.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, the interesting thing, I think right now, Georgia, as you said, Georgia's probably head and shoulders above everybody else. A lot of people probably would, and I think if I was doing, I might pick South Carolina second. but Kentucky's beat South Carolina 4 years in a row, and it's first time since I think the late 40s, early 50s that they've beaten someone in the SEC not named Vandy like 4 years in a row. Which, with all the success that South Carolina's had, it's amazing that Kentucky's beat them. And like Missouri, they won I think 3 in a row against Missouri, and they have won the last couple against Vanderbilt. So, as you said, like I said, the Texas A&M trip, I just don't. I don't see them winning that one, but stranger things have happened. I'm expecting big things with Jimbo Fisher, in Texas A&M. It may not necessarily be this year, but it could be, in the years going forward. So maybe this could be a time, you could pick off a win like that. And Mississippi State, who knows, how they're going to, what they're going to be like this year. Kentucky only beat, when Dan Mullen was there, they lost 7 out of the 8 years, I think, Mullen was there. We had the win 2 years ago when Austin McGinnis hit that long field goal at the end of the game to win. That one, I think playing that one at home, I think Kentucky wins that one. But and like I said, South Carolina is up here in Lexington this year, so that's that has the advantage. I could, as you said, I could see them maybe going 2-1 in that stretch, but I don't see them beating A&M down there. But so it's college football. Stranger things can happen. So.
No question about that. And the SEC is shaking out to Alabama, Georgia, and then everybody else. But we shall see. Things change, and I don't expect it to change much this year. But going forward, it's a new landscape with Dan Mullen on the scene and Jeremy Pruitt in the division, Barry Odom doing good things at Mizzou. It's a very interesting take, in South Carolina going from 3 wins to 6-9 very quickly under Will Muschamp, and he's doing some nice things on the recruiting path and showing us why he's that good of a just X's and O's football coach. And maybe he's got the head coach CEO thing figured out that he didn't at Florida. And that's what happens with a lot of really good football coaches, is that they take their lumps that first big job, and then they figure some things out, and they become a much better at juggling it all and delegating and running a program the next time around. We got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football. The blue-white game is in the books. Not going to try to figure out who won, offense, defense, whatever it was. 45-32, I remember Kevin saying. But the more important situation is figuring out the 4-quarterback battle and various spots across the field as we head toward August camp, September 1st against Central Michigan. Kevin, we appreciate you jumping on board, talking some Kentucky football tonight.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's always a blast and a lot of fun to come on and do this. So always like talking, I can talk college football anytime. So, can't wait till, now that basketball's over, can't wait till September. So.
All right, Kevin. See you later.
All right. Thank you.